I wanted to make a short video about something I recently found out online. Something that I heard years ago, found out years ago about. The first thing is like the lumber that, like, someone wants a tree or lumber or trees cut into lumber that they want to use for structures on their property. Um, I went to West Virginia at one point years ago, and the person I was up there helping, we went over to a guy's property, and he was kind of devastated. He had a small mill that he could do like small scale wood cutting jobs for people who wanted custom, trees cut into lumber that they could use. And he's like, we went over there, and he says, first thing he says, he's like, man, he's like, these people brought over this lumber, these trees, they wanted them cut to these certain dimensions to use for an addition to their house. He's like, I cut them, delivered the wood, they used it. Code enforcement came over, said you can't use the wood, doesn't have a stamp, and you have to take it down and use wood that you buy in a store. And so, like, he was kind of like devastated, and it's kind of like this man, first off, those people spent a lot of money to get that timber cut the way they wanted it. And then that man has had a business his whole life, and he said, I've been doing this my whole life. He's like, I never in my life have I ever experienced this. So he's kind of devastated because a way that he made money on the side he can no longer do, I guess, unless it's agricultural land. And so, like, that's like one thing. And then the other thing is like these people, who don't have a lot of money, a lot of like people who try and live off grid, and they travel around the country, save money, figure out some place they want to settle in on a spot of land, and like get a tiny home. Well, they think they did their research and at the county's codes, where the county keeps their codes, and they think they got all their angles covered. I've heard people say, the county basically said, not literally, but figuratively speaking, if you want to build your house out of toothpicks and glue, go for it. We don't give a shit. But then the state has a bylaw for the whole state where the state says that you can't have a removable structure on the property. You can't, any home that you can have built and delivered, you can't have on the property that's easily removable or whatever. And the thing is these people go and do their research at the areas they choose to live in, where they normally wouldn't be able to afford to do anything. And they think they've got it all figured out, and they get their tiny home, and they find out that maybe they could have done something with the tiny home, like tear it apart and use the wood that a pre-built home was bought, that was Amish wood, not cut to specifications with a stamp on it. And they think, well, we can salvage it, and we can take it and build a permanent structure and do it that way. But then they find out it was that they used Amish people to make their wood, so they can't use that wood, so they're screwed there. They're stuck with the tiny home. They're not allowed to live in it, and it just sits there. And they put a fucking RV on their property and live in an RV when they've got a nice little tiny home that they're not allowed to use. And the thing is on the county website, where these people think they did all their research, there will be a document about it there, but the title of the document isn't really relatable in people's minds, that they're talking about tiny homes that a person would put on a small piece of property for a person that doesn't have a lot of money. And they do it, and they didn't realize it because they didn't see it, because it's really not recognizable as something that relates to their project. And then they find out from code enforcement that they're not allowed to use it. So these people are literally buying property, they do their research, and they think they've got it, and then there's a state bylaw that is named something totally different than it should be, relation to it. So they go and buy their tiny home, get on the property, and they end up putting an RV on the property and not being allowed to live in their tiny home. I gotta say, I totally believe that's 100% planned. It's, they're trying to get people to come into an area, spend money, get a tiny home put on it, buy stuff in an area, and spend money in that area, and then wrecking their fucking plans by telling them that shit. I think that the government, like, wants to rub in our faces, like, set us up for failure, like, make us think that something is okay, and name one document on their site that a person would not relate to their project, that's a state bylaw outside that county code outside the county code, and they go and buy a tiny home, and then the code enforcement comes and tells them they can't have it, and they put an RV on their property when they got a freaking $50,000 or $20,000 tiny home sitting that they can't use. It's messed up, and no one's going to convince me that they're not doing that shit on purpose. They want people to come in, buy land, they want people, to spend money, and then they want to tell them, oh, sorry, you can't have that, and you paid for it, and we did everything to make you buy that and think you could buy it, named a document on the county's website of code enforcement that you would totally not relate to your project, and we fucked you. It's like if you have nothing and you find a way to do something for yourself and live off in a remote area, a rural area, they set you up to think you can do it and get you to buy that land, and then when you buy your tiny house to put on it, then that's when you realize you're fucked, and they tell you, we fucked you. So, I hope all this comes back to bite state and counties on their asses, and people get up in arms about it and give them a bunch of shit and throw fits and cause huge inconveniences for states and counties who like to do that to people who just want to enjoy nature like the wealthy do on a smaller budget.